The night was not like other nights. August had pressed down upon the low country until the air itself seemed to sweat, and the cotton fields lay silent under a sky choked with stars. The slave cabins held no light, only here and there the faint orange glow of a clay lamp, barely breathing. But Cephas saw. 12 years old, small for his age, with eyes that had learned to read darkness, Cephas pressed his face to the crack in the cabin door. His mother's old quilt was wrapped around his shoulders, though the night was warm. He had been waiting. He did not know for what, but something had kept him awake. Then he saw the smoke. The master's barn, the great wooden structure where the year's cotton waited for the gin, was burning. But it was not the fire that made Cephas's heart stop. It was the way the flames rose. Not from one place. Not from two. From 3 separate corners of the barn, the fire climbed into the night sky, 3 columns of orange and red, reaching upward like fingers. 3 places. Cephas's breath caught in his throat. He knew, with the certainty of a child who has learned to watch and wait, that this was no accident. Cotton did not catch fire in 3 places at once. Someone had walked through the darkness with a purpose. The bells began to ring. Dogs barked. White men's voices cut through the night, overseers shouting, the master's voice rising above them all. Cephas's mother, Ruth, woke with a start and pulled him away from the door. Stay back, she whispered, but her hands were shaking. By morning, the barn was ash. Master Whitfield gathered every slave before the big house, his face pale with fury, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. Behind him stood his son, Thomas, 16 years old, watching with an expression Cephas could not read. This fire was set, Master Whitfield said. His voice was quiet, quieter than Cephas had ever heard it. That quiet was more frightening than shouting. 3 places. 3 separate fires. Someone in this quarter thinks they can steal from me. Thinks they can burn what I have built. The overseer, Mr. Hodge, walked slowly along the line of slaves, his whip coiled in his hand. He looked at each face, searching. When his eyes reached Cephas, they paused, just for a moment, then moved on. Cephas looked straight ahead. He had learned, in 12 years of life, that the eyes could betray what the mouth kept hidden. He kept his face empty, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But inside, he was counting. Counting the days. Counting the faces. Counting the fires that had yet to be lit. Cephas was born in the autumn of 1811, in the same cabin where he now slept, a one-room structure of logs and clay, with a roof that leaked when it rained and a floor of packed earth that turned to mud in winter. His mother, Ruth, had been 17 years old. His father, Isaiah, had been working in the stables when word came that the baby was coming. Isaiah had run all the way from the stables to the cabin, but by the time he arrived, Cephas was already in Ruth's arms. The midwife, an old woman named Hagar who had been born in Africa and still remembered the sound of the ocean on another shore, had washed the baby and wrapped him in a piece of worn cloth. Look at his eyes, Hagar had said. This one sees everything. Isaiah had taken his son in his arms and looked into those eyes. He had seen something there that made him both proud and afraid. His name is Cephas, he said. It means rock in the old language. Ruth had nodded, too tired to speak, but she had smiled. A rock. Something that would not break. The Whitfield Plantation stretched across 1,200 acres of South Carolina low country, between the pine forests and the slow-moving rivers that ran the color of tea. The big house stood on a rise, painted white, with columns in front and a veranda where the family sat on summer evenings. Behind it, invisible from the front windows, lay the quarter, 2 rows of cabins where more than 80 enslaved people lived and worked and died. Cephas grew up watching. He watched the older children go to the fields at dawn and return at dusk, their backs bent, their faces empty. He watched his mother come home with bleeding hands from the cotton bolls. He watched his father slip away to the stables before sunrise and return long after dark, smelling of horses and hay. He also watched the white people. He watched Master Whitfield ride his horse through the fields, counting the rows, measuring the work. He watched Mrs. Whitfield walk to the garden in her wide skirts, never looking at the slaves who stepped aside to let her pass. And he watched Thomas, the master's son, who was 4 years older than Cephas and who sometimes stood at the edge of the quarter, just looking, never speaking. When Cephas was 4 years old, he asked his mother a question. "Mama, why do they have so much and we have so little?" Ruth had stopped what she was doing, mending a torn shirt by the light of a clay lamp, and looked at her son. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she pulled him close and whispered in his ear. "Because they took it. And they keep taking. But don't you ever let them take your eyes, Cephas. You keep watching. You keep remembering." Cephas did not understand everything she meant, but he understood the watching. He understood the remembering. He would need both. When Cephas was 6 years old, his mother gave birth to a girl. They named her Patience, because Ruth said it would take patience to survive in this world. Patience was small and quiet, with eyes like her brother, watchful, waiting. For a few months, the cabin was full. Isaiah would come home from the stables and hold his daughter, singing songs his own mother had sung to him in a language he no longer remembered. Ruth would nurse the baby and smile, a rare thing, her smile, and Cephas would sit in the corner and watch them all, feeling for the first time that maybe life could hold more than just work and hunger and fear. Then one night in early spring, the riders came. Cephas woke to the sound of horses and the creak of wagon wheels. He slipped to the door and looked out. 3 wagons stood in the moonlit yard, and white men were walking through the quarter, going from cabin to cabin. In the big house, lamps burned in every window. His mother was already awake, holding Patience tight against her chest. Isaiah stood at the door, his body rigid, his hands clenched into fists. "Papa?" Cephas whispered. Isaiah did not answer. He only watched as the white men came closer. When they reached the cabin, they did not knock. The door swung open, and Mr. Hodge stood there, a piece of paper in his hand. Behind him, 2 strange white men waited. "This one," Mr. Hodge said, pointing at Patience. "The master sold her. New plantation up in Columbia." Ruth screamed. It was a sound Cephas had never heard before, a sound that came from somewhere deep, somewhere broken. She held Patience so tight that the baby began to cry. Isaiah stepped forward. "Please," he said. "She's just a baby. She needs her mama." Mr. Hodge looked at him with something that might have been surprise, or might have been nothing at all. "You think I make the decisions? You think I care?" He nodded to the strange men, who stepped into the cabin and pulled Patience from Ruth's arms. Cephas watched his sister disappear into the night. He watched his mother fall to the ground, her cries filling the darkness. He watched his father stand frozen, his fists still clenched, his face a mask of stone. And he watched the wagons roll away, carrying Patience toward a place he would never know. That night, Cephas learned that love was a thing that could be taken. That family was a word white people used but did not understand. That the only thing you could truly keep was the watching, the remembering. He lay awake until dawn, and in his mind, he began to count. At 7 years old, Cephas went to the cotton fields for the first time. The rows stretched endlessly, green plants heavy with white bolls under the brutal sun. The work began before sunrise and ended after sunset, with a short break at midday for a meal of cold cornbread and water. The overseer, Mr. Hodge, rode up and down the rows on his horse, his whip always ready, his eyes always watching. Cephas learned quickly. He learned how to bend without breaking his back, how to fill his sack without cutting his fingers on the sharp bowls, how to keep moving even when his body screamed for rest. He learned to watch the sun and count the hours. He learned to read the overseer's moods, the way Mr. Hodge's jaw tightened before a beating, the way his eyes narrowed when he was looking for someone to punish. He also learned to be invisible. Not truly invisible, but invisible enough. He kept his head down, his mouth shut, his eyes on his work. When Mr. Hodge rode past, Cephas was just another child in the fields, no different from the others. But at night, in the cabin, he would lie awake and remember. He remembered Patience's face the night she was taken. He remembered his mother's scream. He remembered his father's clenched fists. And he remembered the wagons rolling away into the darkness. One evening, after a day so hot that 3 people had collapsed in the fields, Isaiah came to sit beside his son. They sat on the cabin step, watching the stars appear one by one. "Papa," Cephas said, "will we ever be free?" Isaiah was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Freedom is a word, son. Words mean different things to different people. What does it mean to you?" Isaiah looked up at the stars. "It means no one tells you where to stand. No one tells you when to wake. No one takes what is yours." He paused. "It means your sister comes home." Cephas thought about this. "How do we get it?" Isaiah turned to look at his son. In the darkness, his eyes glowed faintly, catching the starlight. "You keep watching," he said. "You keep remembering. And when the time comes, you move." Cephas nodded. He understood. The watching. The remembering. The waiting for the time to move. When Cephas was 9, his father began taking him to the stables. Isaiah's work with the horses was respected even by the white people. Master Whitfield's horses were the finest in the county, and Isaiah was the reason. He knew how to calm a frightened mare, how to gentle a stallion that no other man could approach. The horses trusted him in a way they trusted no one else. In the stables, away from the fields and the overseer's eyes, Isaiah taught his son what he knew. He taught him how to read a horse's mood by the set of its ears, the flicker of its tail. He taught him how to move slowly, speak softly, earn trust. He taught him that strength was not always loud, sometimes it was quiet, patient, waiting. "These horses," Isaiah said one evening, "they are not free either. They belong to the master, just like us. But look at them. They still have fire. They still have spirit. They just learn when to show it and when to hide it." Cephas looked at the horses, their dark eyes watching him, their bodies tensed for flight or fight. He understood. They were waiting, too. That winter, something changed. Master Whitfield's favorite horse, a black stallion named Caesar, fell sick. Isaiah tended him day and night, sleeping in the stable, barely eating. But Caesar did not recover. One morning, Isaiah found him dead in his stall. Master Whitfield was furious. He accused Isaiah of negligence, of not caring for the horse properly. Isaiah tried to explain. The horse had been sick when he first noticed. He had done everything he could, but Master Whitfield did not want to hear explanations. "You're done with the stables," he said. "You'll go to the fields tomorrow. Let someone else tend the horses." Isaiah said nothing. He bowed his head and walked away. But that night, in the cabin, Cephas saw something in his father's eyes that he had never seen before. It was not anger. Isaiah's anger was always hidden, controlled. It was something deeper. Something that had been waiting a long time. "Papa," Cephas whispered, "what are you thinking?" Isaiah looked at his son. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that the time to move might be coming." Not long after Isaiah was sent to the fields, a strange thing happened. Thomas Whitfield, the master's son, appeared at the edge of the quarter. He was 16 now, tall and thin, with his father's sharp features but not his hardness. He stood for a long time, just looking, the way he had when he was younger. Then he walked toward the cabins. The slaves who saw him coming stepped aside, their eyes downcast. A white man walking through the quarter was never good news. But Thomas did not stop at any cabin. He walked straight to where Cephas sat on his step, mending a torn sack. For a long moment, they looked at each other. Cephas kept his face empty, his eyes on the ground. "You're Isaiah's boy," Thomas said. It was not a question. Cephas nodded. "I heard about the horse. I'm sorry." Thomas's voice was quiet, almost awkward. "My father, he's not always fair." Cephas did not know what to say. A white man apologizing? It made no sense. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and flat. "A book." "Can you read?" he asked. Cephas shook his head. "I thought not." Thomas held out the book. "This is a Bible." It's full of stories. Stories about people who were slaves, people who were free, people who fought for what was right. Cephas stared at the book. He did not take it. Thomas seemed to understand. He placed the book on the step, beside Cephas. "Keep it," he said. "Hide it. Learn from it if you can." He paused. "I know what it's like to be trapped. My father traps everyone, even me." Then he turned and walked away. Cephas sat for a long time, staring at the book. When he finally picked it up, he felt its weight, the weight of paper, of words, of stories he could not yet read. He hid it in the cabin, under a loose board, where no one would find it. That night, he told his father about Thomas. Isaiah listened, his face unreadable. When Cephas finished, he said, "Be careful, son. White men's kindness is like water in the desert, it looks like life, but it might be a mirage." Cephas nodded. He understood. But he also understood that the book was there, waiting, full of stories he needed to know. The winter of 1822 was the coldest anyone could remember. The sky stayed grey for weeks, and a wind blew from the north that cut through the cabin walls like a knife. Food was scarce, rations had been cut after the fire, and what little remained was barely enough to keep a person alive. Cephas watched his mother grow thin. Ruth had never been large, but now her face was all sharp angles, her eyes too big in their sockets. She moved slowly, carefully, as if each step cost her something she could not get back. Isaiah gave his own food to Ruth, insisting he was not hungry. Cephas did the same. But it was not enough. One night, Isaiah woke Cephas in the darkness. "Come," he whispered. They slipped out of the cabin and moved through the quarter like shadows. Isaiah led the way to the master's corn crib, a small building where the winter stores were kept. He had a tool in his hand, something metal that caught the faint starlight. "Papa," Cephas whispered, "if they catch us." "They won't." Isaiah's voice was calm, certain. "You watch. You remember. I'll do the rest." Cephas watched as his father worked the lock, his movements sure and quiet. The lock clicked open. Isaiah slipped inside and emerged moments later with a small sack of corn. They made it back to the cabin without being seen. Ruth woke to find them there, the corn hidden under the bed. She looked at Isaiah, and for a moment, her face held something that might have been fear. Then it softened. "You're a good man," she whispered. Isaiah said nothing. He lay down beside her and closed his eyes. The corn lasted a week. Then Isaiah went back to the corn crib. And again. And again. Each time, Cephas watched. Each time, his heart pounded. Each time, they returned safely. But Cephas knew it could not last forever. It lasted until February. On a night with no moon, when the cold had driven even the dogs inside, Isaiah went to the corn crib one last time. Cephas waited in the cabin, counting the minutes, his heart racing. An hour passed. Then another. When the door finally opened, it was not Isaiah who entered. It was Mr. Hodge, and behind him, two white men held Isaiah between them. Cephas's mother screamed. Mr. Hodge ignored her. "Get the master," he said to one of the men. Master Whitfield came, wrapped in a heavy coat, his face hard in the lantern light. He looked at Isaiah, then at the sack of corn that lay on the ground where Isaiah had dropped it. "A thief," he said. "I should have known." Isaiah said nothing. His face was bloody, they had beaten him before bringing him back, but his eyes were clear. When they passed over Cephas, they held the same message they always had: watch. Remember. Wait. In the morning, all the slaves were gathered to watch the whipping. Isaiah was tied to a post in the center of the quarter. Mr. Hodge raised the whip, a long strip of leather, braided and heavy, and brought it down across Isaiah's back. The sound was like nothing Cephas had ever heard. A crack, and then a wet thud, and then a gasp from the crowd. Isaiah did not scream. The whip fell again. And again. And again. Cephas counted. 20 lashes. 30. 40. His mother stood beside him, her hand gripping his so tight that her nails drew blood, but she did not make a sound. At 50 lashes, Mr. Hodge stopped. Isaiah hung from the post, his back a ruin of blood and torn flesh, but his head was still raised. His eyes found Cephas in the crowd, and for just a moment, they held something that might have been a message. Then he was cut down and dragged back to the cabin. He did not rise from his pallet for 3 weeks. Isaiah never fully recovered from the whipping. The wounds healed, after a fashion. Ruth cleaned them with herbs and prayed over them each night, but something inside him had broken. He coughed constantly, a deep, wet sound that shook his whole body. He grew thinner, weaker, until he could barely walk to the fields, let alone work in them. Master Whitfield sent word that Isaiah was useless now, that his rations would be cut. Ruth fought back. She went to the big house herself, begged on her knees, but Mrs. Whitfield only looked away, and Master Whitfield ordered her off the property. By March, Isaiah could no longer leave the cabin. Cephas sat with him each night, holding his hand, watching the life drain slowly out of his father's eyes. They did not speak much. Isaiah had never been a man of many words, but sometimes, in the darkness, he would whisper things that Cephas stored away like precious things. "Remember the horses," he said one night. "They trusted me because I was patient. Because I waited. I'll remember, Papa." "The fire," Isaiah said another night. "Fire is the only thing they understand. It takes what they have. It reminds them they are not as powerful as they think. I'll remember." On the last night, Isaiah gripped Cephas's hand with a strength that surprised them both. His eyes, so dim for weeks, blazed suddenly bright. "Don't let them break you, son," he whispered. "Watch. Remember. And when the time comes, move." Cephas finished. Isaiah smiled. It was the last thing he did. He died before dawn, and Cephas sat with him until the light came, holding the hand that had taught him so much. After Isaiah died, something changed in Cephas. He still went to the fields. He still kept his head down, his mouth shut, his eyes watching. But now the watching had a purpose. He was not just surviving anymore. He was waiting for the time to move. The time came in late summer. All spring and early summer, Cephas had been watching the barn, the new barn that had been built to replace the one that burned. He watched when the cotton was brought in, when the supplies were stored, when the white men came and went. He noted the guards, the dogs, the hours of darkness when no one watched. He also watched the corn crib, the stables, the big house itself. He noted where the lamps were kept, where the hay was stored, where the wind came from on summer nights. And he remembered his father's words, "Fire is the only thing they understand." One night in August, when the air was thick and heavy and even the dogs were too hot to bark, Cephas slipped out of the cabin. He had prepared for weeks. He had hidden small amounts of lamp oil in a gourd, wrapped in cloth to keep it from spilling. He had gathered dry kindling from the woods, storing it under the cabin. He had watched the guards until he knew their patterns, when they slept, when they woke, when they walked their rounds. Now he moved through the darkness like a shadow. The barn loomed ahead of him, huge and dark. He circled to the back, where the wall was closest to the woods. Here, he had noticed, the wood was old and dry, perfect for catching flame. He poured the lamp oil along the base of the wall, then moved to the side, where more dry wood was stacked. He poured again. Then to the front corner, where the hay for the horses was stored. 3 places. 3 fires. He struck his flint, a small piece of metal his father had given him long ago, saying, "You never know when you'll need to make light." The spark caught the oil-soaked wood, and flames began to rise. Cephas did not wait to watch. He ran. Behind him, the fire grew. He could hear it crackling, could feel its heat on his back. When he reached the edge of the woods, he turned and looked. 3 columns of flame rose into the night sky, lighting up the whole plantation. The barn was burning, and it was burning in 3 places at once. Cephas smiled, the first smile in a very long time, and disappeared into the trees. By morning, the barn was gone. Master Whitfield stood in the ashes, his face grey with shock and fury. The slaves were gathered in the yard, their faces empty, their eyes downcast. Mr. Hodge walked among them, asking questions, threatening punishments, but no one spoke. Cephas stood with his mother, his face as empty as everyone else's. Inside, his heart was pounding, but he had learned long ago how to hide what he felt. This was no accident, Master Whitfield said, his voice carrying across the yard. 3 fires. 3 separate places. Someone in this quarter did this. He looked at the slaves, one by one. When his eyes reached Cephas, they paused, just for a moment, but Cephas kept his face empty, his gaze on the ground. Someone will talk, Master Whitfield said. Someone always talks. And when they do, the person who did this will wish they had never been born. The investigation went on for days. Mr. Hodge questioned every slave, sometimes gently, sometimes with the whip. But no one talked. No one knew, or if they knew, they kept it hidden. On the 3rd day, Thomas Whitfield appeared at the edge of the quarter again. He walked straight to Cephas's cabin and stood outside, waiting. Ruth saw him first. She pulled Cephas inside and told him to stay hidden, but Cephas knew it was no use. If Thomas wanted to find him, he would. He went outside. They stood facing each other, the white boy and the black boy, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then Thomas said, "I know it was you." Cephas's heart stopped. But he kept his face empty. Thomas went on. "I saw you. That night. I couldn't sleep, and I was looking out my window. I saw someone running from the barn. Small. Fast. I know it was you." Still, Cephas said nothing. "I'm not going to tell anyone," Thomas said. His voice was strange, almost sad. "My father, he deserves it. He deserves worse." Cephas finally spoke. "Why are you telling me this?" Thomas looked away. "Because I'm trapped too. Not the same way, I know that. But trapped all the same. And when I saw that fire, I felt, I don't know, hope. Like maybe things could change." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread. "Here. You must be hungry." Cephas took the bread. He did not say thank you, the word felt wrong in his mouth, but he took it. Thomas nodded and walked away. That night, Cephas shared the bread with his mother. He did not tell her what Thomas had said. Some things were too dangerous to speak aloud. The autumn after the fire was hard. Master Whitfield, desperate to recover his losses, drove the slaves harder than ever. They worked from before dawn until after dark, 7 days a week. Rations were cut again. The whip was used more freely. Ruth grew sick. It started with a cough, just a small one, the kind that came every winter. But it did not go away. It got worse, deeper, until she could hardly breathe some nights. She grew thinner, paler, until she looked like a ghost of herself. Cephas did everything he could. He gave her his own food. He stayed up nights, wiping her forehead with cool water. He begged Hagar, the old midwife, for herbs and medicines. But nothing helped. One night in December, Ruth called Cephas to her side. "My son," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My beautiful boy. Mama, don't talk. Save your strength." "No?" She gripped his hand. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you long ago." Cephas leaned close. "Your father," Ruth said, "he didn't just steal corn. He was planning something. A fire. A big fire. He wanted to burn it all, the barn, the big house, everything. He told me once that if he couldn't be free, he would make sure nothing here was left." Cephas nodded. "I know, Mama. He told me." Ruth smiled. "Good. Then you know what you have to do." "Mama. Don't stop, Cephas. Don't ever stop. The fire you started, that was just the beginning. Keep watching. Keep remembering. Keep moving when the time comes. Those were her last words. She died before dawn, and Cephas sat with her until the light came, just as he had with his father. When the sun finally rose, he was alone in the world. After Ruth died, Cephas felt something he had never felt before. Not grief, he had learned to carry grief, to hide it away where it could not hurt him. Not fear, fear was an old companion, familiar as his own heartbeat. What he felt was emptiness. A hollow space inside him where his family had been. He was 12 years old. He had no father, no mother, no sister. He had nothing but his own 2 hands and the memory of fire. The other slaves looked at him differently now. Some avoided him, as if his loss might be catching. Others watched him with something like respect. He had lost everyone, and still he worked, still he survived, still he kept his face empty and his eyes watching. Hagar, the old midwife, took him under her wing. She brought him extra food when she could, checked on him at night, told him stories of Africa and the ocean and the people who had been taken. You have the old spirit, she told him once. The spirit that does not break. Your father had it. Your mother had it. Now you carry it. Cephas nodded. He did not know what to say. The winter passed. Spring came. The cotton grew again. Cephas worked in the fields, watched the overseer, counted the days. But now his watching had a new purpose. He was not just surviving anymore. He was waiting. And in the waiting, he was planning. The second fire came in the summer of 1824. Cephas was 13 now, taller, stronger, but still small enough to move through the shadows unnoticed. He had spent months watching, planning, preparing. He knew every building on the plantation, every guard, every dog. He knew where the lamp oil was kept, where the hay was stored, where the wind came from on hot summer nights. He chose a night with no moon, when the air was thick and heavy and even the dogs were too tired to bark. He struck the big house first. The Whitfield mansion stood on its rise, white and proud, visible from everywhere on the plantation. Cephas circled to the back, where the kitchen was separate from the main house, a common practice, to keep the heat of cooking away from the living quarters. The kitchen was made of wood, old and dry, and it had its own supply of lamp oil. He poured the oil along the kitchen wall, then moved to the stable where his father had once worked. More oil. More kindling. Then to the new barn, rebuilt after the first fire, now full of cotton waiting for the gin. 3 places. 3 fires. He struck his flint. The flames caught. This time, he stayed to watch. The kitchen went up first, a roar of flame that lit the night. Then the stable, the horses screaming as they smelled smoke. Then the barn, its dry wood catching like tinder. Within minutes, the whole plantation was ablaze. Cephas watched from the edge of the woods as white figures ran screaming from the big house. He watched Master Whitfield stumble out, his nightshirt aflame, his wife following with their children. He watched Thomas appear at an upstairs window, trapped by the fire. For a moment, Cephas hesitated. Thomas had helped him. Thomas had kept his secret. But before he could move, Thomas jumped. He landed badly, his leg twisting beneath him, and lay in the yard, screaming. They hunted him for 3 days. Dogs, men on horses, torches in the night. Cephas ran and hid, moving through the swamps and forests like the animal he had become. He slept in trees, ate berries and raw fish, drank from streams so dark they looked like ink. On the 3rd day, the dogs lost his scent. He had crossed water too many times, doubled back on his own tracks, used every trick his father had taught him. The hunters gave up and went home. Cephas kept moving. He traveled north, toward the places Hagar had told him about, places where a black man might be free. He walked at night and slept by day, always watching, always listening. He met others on the road, runaways like himself, moving through the darkness toward an unknown destination. Some told him about the Underground Railroad, about people who would help him reach freedom. Others told him about Canada, where the law said a man could not be owned. Cephas listened and remembered, but he did not commit to any path. He was still watching. Still waiting. 5 years passed. Cephas was 18 now, a man grown. He had traveled far, to the north, to the cities, to places where slavery did not exist. He had worked on boats, in factories, on farms. He had learned to read, finally, using that Bible Thomas had given him so long ago. He had learned that the world was bigger and stranger than he had ever imagined. But he had never forgotten where he came from. In the summer of 1829, he went back. He traveled south, moving carefully, always watching. The slave catchers were still active, still hunting runaways. But Cephas had learned to move like a ghost, to appear and disappear at will. When he reached the Whitfield Plantation, he hardly recognized it. The big house was gone, only a burned shell remained, overgrown with vines. The barns and stables were gone too, replaced by nothing but weeds and young trees. The fields lay fallow, the cotton replaced by wild grass. He found Hagar in a small cabin at the edge of the quarter, the only one still standing. She was ancient now, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes still held their old fire. "You came back," she said. "I knew you would." "What happened here?" Cephas asked. Hagar told him. After the fire, Master Whitfield had tried to rebuild, but his heart was broken, first by the loss of his house, then by the death of his son. Thomas died. Cephas felt a strange pang. Hurt bad in the fire. Lived a year, but never walked again. Died of a fever, they say. Some say he just gave up. Cephas was silent. The master didn't last much longer, Hagar went on. Sold off most of us, let the place go to ruin. Died 2 years ago. Now there's nothing left. Cephas looked at the ruins, the empty fields, the single cabin where Hagar lived alone. He thought of his father, his mother, his sister. He thought of Thomas, who had helped him and died for it. And he thought of the fire that had risen from 3 places, that had burned so bright. Cephas stayed with Hagar for 3 days. He helped her repair her cabin, brought her food from the woods, listened to her stories of Africa and the old days. On the last night, they sat by a small fire, watching the flames dance. "You'll go north again?" Hagar asked. Cephas nodded. "There's work to do. People to help. The railroad needs conductors." Hagar smiled. "Your father would be proud. Your mother too." Cephas was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, charred piece of wood, the same piece his father had given him years ago, the one that had started everything. "This was my father's," he said. "He told me fire was the only thing they understood." He was right. He held the wood for a moment, feeling its weight, its history. Then he tossed it into the flames. The fire flared, bright and hot, and then settled back to its steady burn. In the morning, Cephas left. He walked north, toward the rising sun, carrying with him the memory of fire and the hope of freedom. Behind him, the plantation lay silent, a graveyard of dreams, a monument to the people who had lived and died there, forgotten by history, remembered only by the wind that whispered through the pines. The Whitfield Plantation exists no more. The land was sold, divided, sold again. Today, it is part of a larger farm, the fields planted with soybeans instead of cotton. No marker stands where the slave quarter once stood. No plaque remembers the people who lived and died there. But sometimes, on summer nights, when the air is thick and heavy and the wind blows from the south, the old-timers say you can see something strange. A flicker of light in the darkness. A glow where no fire should be. They say it's the ghost of a boy, running through the trees, carrying fire in his hands. They say it's the memory of all those who were never free, burning still. And maybe they are right. Because some fires never go out. Some flames are passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, from generation to generation. They burn in the darkness, waiting for the time when the world will finally see. Cephas's fire still burns. Somewhere, in the space between memory and hope, it always will. Cephas turned and ran.